Hello, everybody. It is Monday, April 26, 2021. It's about 10:30 a.m. on the Pacific coast of North America. This is the open source workstream for the Inclusive Naming Initiative's bi-weekly meeting. My name is Celeste Horgan. I am going to be your host. Stephen Augustus, who is one of your key leads, or is one of your apologies. Also one of your leads is
co-workstream lead.
Yeah. Struggling, is also in the chat. I am going to drop a link to the meeting notes, and I would love if you could all add yourself as attendees. You should have access if you are a part of the appropriate mailing lists. First things first, do we have any administravia or any general notes that we need to take care of? Okay, doesn't sound like we have any. Sounds good to me. So typically we would go through our project board review today next, but what I'm actually thinking is I'd like to skip down to open discussion first, and then we'll loop back around to reviewing our open tasks after. Because this is a suggestion that Dale had and that Stephen and I have been talking about, and I would like to bring it to the larger group. So is that okay with everybody?
+1.
Okay, cool. So I'm wondering if maybe Dale.
Hi.
Hi. Sorry to call on you without asking you.
No problem. I joined because I figured you might want me to.
I would. It would be lovely. I'm wondering if you could summarize your proposal for the group, and then we can talk about it.
Yeah, I'll be really brief. The proposal is that the open source, this group takes. Well, first of all, let me take it up a level. The proposal is that there is a work stream that is focused on projects that are specifically dedicated to identifying and strengthening, fortifying tooling that projects, communities, and in some cases, companies can use to detect at minimum, and in some cases, remediate language that is not inclusive. There are a couple of projects that have already been contributed. There are some from IBM that are in the open source space, Take Two, and various iterations of that. There is one that Accenture just mentioned, a new member to our inclusive naming group that they are creating as well. That's looking at some machine learning aspects. And what we need, I believe, what we need to do is to have a group that's looking at those projects, identifying how they can connect the data we're providing through the actual terminology to create data sources for them, but also provide some security around what they're doing so that they can expand the capabilities of those tools without bias. So that's really what we're looking for. And the question is, should that mission reside here with this team, or should it be part of some other work stream or a standalone?
So yeah, so I will speak on the higher level and why these things are not as visible as they maybe should be and need to be at this point. So when we had initially discussed all of the work streams, we tossed some ideas out on a sheet of paper, which eventually became a GitHub discussion. One of the ones that came up was the idea of intake, right? So there was supposed to be a work stream WS intake, or whatever, and we decided to well, we played around with the naming as we do here, and workstream intake became community and tooling. So community and tooling, the idea would be to one, focus on the kind of contributor experience aspect of this. So think like CNCF SIG contributor strategy or Kubernetes SIG contributor experience. And then the other aspect of it would be handling tooling, right? Handling intake of tooling and maintenance for people who were interested in potentially donating tooling or processes to the project or to the initiative. There's also another secret work stream that is Workstream admin, which I guess doesn't officially exist on paper. It's more so the infrastructure admins, myself, Ed, Matthew to an extent, who are focused on things like making sure permissions are right on mailing lists and making sure people have access to GitHub, things of that nature. Given this proposal, I feel that at the start we did not have, and we continue to not have enough of the people who should have those hats on in both the admin on the admin side and the community and tooling. I've had a few conversations with folks that would be interested in potentially leading or participating in that stuff. But I would say that given the, I would agree that given we have mass here, a bit more mass here, that we combine all of those efforts and figure out how to coordinate. I see kind of a few different things on the table. One is how we can get contributors started in general, how we bring new projects and into the fold and maintain them long term, and then also the open source-ness of it all, right? So I would agree that we probably need to combine these efforts. I think that with that said, this becomes sort of a hybrid work stream, kind of both along the pillar and the program level, with a few people heading up explicit efforts kind of along that intake, the community side and the open source side. So I will say no more for a second.
Can I open it up to everybody else for comments then?
So Stephen, to net it out, your proposal is that intake for projects, and including tools, the overall infrastructure admin, IT support for the entire inclusive naming initiative, and the other goals of the open source, this work group, all become one large work stream combined.
Yes.
But we would have different metrics, right? One would be the smooth running of the infrastructure that supports this effort, which is different than the nurturing of projects that are being used to address inclusive naming, detected, and do you think we can handle both in one without, a conflict of interests? Yeah, because it's two different missions.
Yeah, I think actually the folks who are involved are interested in project intake in open source communities in general. It's the Venn diagram is almost a circle. There are a lot of people who are interested in the same things, and I'm not sure, like I'm interim lead for community and tooling, and I'm one of the admins and a co-lead over here. I think that it makes sense for them to have conversations in the same room, and maybe we consider extending the meeting time to be able to do that.
I mean, I'm willing to try it, but I think we should put some, metrics in place to say we know we're successful and we're progressing if these things are happening, and then we can checkpoint in a quarter and say, is it working, or are we not giving enough airtime to one subject versus another, right? So we need to fork into two different.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
I think that today we are not doing the community and tooling side.
Yeah.
And so I think that
Mhm.
the metric, at least for me, is doing more than we have been doing. We've had these discussions. We've had these discussions kind of like across Slack, some in GitHub discussions, but it has not turned into, I think, what we need it to be now. Especially that, you know, a few of us are having different conversations about, like, you know, if we look at terms, if we think about things like AlexJS, or there's a thing open for retext.js and their word lists overall. There's just looking at different solutions. I think a lot of people are starting to look to us to provide that answer, and we're not having a structured discussion about it.
Yeah, so I guess that leads into like what my follow-on question is right now, and I'm taking notes to answer it as we're talking, but I'm gonna ask the question, which is, if the OSS workstream starts doing kind of effectively support of open source projects, which is, I think, a broad term to describe what we're talking about here. What does the tentative to-do list of things that we know we need to do, and we know we need to talk about, and we know somebody needs to be a decision maker on? So what I've gleaned so far is Lindsay had she dropped a link in the chat of something that needs effectively a decision maker on. There's, as Stephen mentioned, conversation around alex.js and retext.js. There is the idea of putting word lists into a machine readable data format once those recommendations are made. There's IBM's Take Two project, which again needs kind of a data format. What else? What else needs to be done in this space?
So I would say just the fact that we're having this conversation is something that needs to happen, right? That, you know, I as a decision maker, quote unquote, like, I don't have the answer for DCI lint configuration. Like, I've seen this issue, I've seen this PR for a while now, and but I've also seen the, you know, I think someone said, well, let's just do that, right? And let's just do that is not there's no simple answer for let's just do that. You know, there's no guarantee that any one solution that we choose will be the right one. If we're being looked to provide solutions, ad hoc choosing one that someone PRs is not the right solution, right?
I agree.
All right. So just the fact that we're having this conversation now is good, and I think that there should be at the bare minimum a venue for it that is auditable in some way. I don't know that DCI lint is the right choice. I don't know that anything that is happening in AlexJS or retext are the right choices. Maybe we want something that, you know, collaboration between language, Workstream language, and us is to make some of these recommendations concrete, or at least provide provide a set of lists that we would look to, right? So now I'm rambling, and
So I think we're saying one, and Stephen, correct me if I'm misstating it. One objective is to provide guidelines, if you will, for maybe selecting different types of a tool that would achieve a certain goal that's available in open source. Maybe to do that, we should inventory maybe what exists from the collective community. There are a couple of us who contributed here, but I know with absolute certainty, because many of the folks have met with me, that there are other tools that others are using. So maybe that's one of the goals, just like we're doing an inventory of terms, is of tools, open source, with a high priority on the open source tools that our participants are aware of, and then do some sort of a eval on what does the tool need in order to be useful. Can it be used as is right now? What are the questions maybe for community members? And then for things that I think what you're saying as well is we're not we're not going to attempt to say this is the tool that everybody must use, right?
Yeah,
It's basically, these are the features that this tool supports, and these are the cautions, right? Or the boundaries that you need to be aware of. And then this is what, and then if there are things we can do as an overall I&I community to make those tools more usable, especially by those who have low budget for tools, that would be, I think, helpful.
yeah.
I think to both Dale, your point and Stephen's point, I think that it really is an important bullet to highlight, but I don't think it should fall on us to do. I think that the person actually, putting forth the tool should have at least a blurb. Maybe we put that in some sort of recommendations, like a blurb that dictates use case, limitations, etc., because they're the ones who will know it best, right?
Yeah.
And then we check for technical viability and do a curated sort of registry with the disclaimer that, hey, this is not an endorsement of any of these tools, more so a guide of what's available out there.
Yes, exactly. And then there's one other stretch goal I have, or two, I should say, for this, is I am concerned that if we aren't fast enough as an industry, AI advancements will reinforce the language that we are attempting to remove or reduce. And so one of the things I do want us to leverage within this work stream is our collective AI knowledge, especially as it applies to tools like this, to help identify and eliminate if possible bias in AI models, so that the learning and training models that are created are trained not to identify biased terms as good or unbiased terms as bad. So I know Take Two, we're attempting to do that. I also know that the Accenture description, and this is just from the person who asked to join the mailing list, seems to be also on that path. But I do think that is a related topic that isn't just here is an inventory of tools for your use with some guidelines on their usage. But here's some additional things, learnings that you need to be aware of, especially those of you in the AI world, as we go down this path.
Yeah.
Right. And the case everybody knows very well, and I'll follow my sword as an IBMer, is we had to withdraw, right, the AI image detection technology because it was not differentiating skin tones effectively, right? And so if you think about that in the context of language, how do we ensure that, starting with open source, but maybe retrofitting back into proprietary products that people are purchasing, that is also being used and not subject to bias, right, within AI, as AI models are integrated into tools like this. Thoughts, comments on that?
I love that. I love
Okay.
that.
I think that's definitely where you're spot on as far as where we want to be headed, right? When we're vision casting, that is the ultimate goal. I think maybe where folks get tripped up and where we tend to slow down, and I can only speak for the larger companies that I've been in, is getting started, right? And so that's sort of a proposal and an observation all wrapped in one. So given that we have at least 2 or 3 that you mentioned, Dale, and one that I threw in, can we sort of use that as a jumping off point to comb through those, say, okay, this is what we'll go ahead and add to the list. This is a start, because we still do want to keep those contributors motivated, right? And then, pull out maybe what we would have liked to see, what's missing, what we want to do going forward for the next requests. Is that a
yes
reasonable way forward?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So I think there's an aspect of this that kind of along that story that we can explore, or we will want to explore eventually, which is we've got all of these tools, and we've mentioned that, finding fit essentially, right? But we also have the opportunity to, kind of talking from the intake side, right? If one of these if one of these tools was interested in bringing that tool into inclusive naming, right, then that's a discussion that we would want and should have. It would be nice to be able to say, here's your starter kit, right? And here's a tool to get you started. And we can't necessarily do that today. It'd be nice to get to a point where we could.
Yeah.
I know Take Two would love to be part of that. We intentionally contributed it to be hosted by Linux Foundation for this very purpose. So I know that they'd love to be part of that. Stephen, speaking on behalf of our Take Two team.
Yeah.
And as you see, there's a starter kit there. I'm pretty sure we're not the only ones.
Okay. So because we are, as we've mentioned, in a very short half-hour meeting, and we've got 5 minutes left, I'm going to propose 2 action items out of this discussion. Because it sounds like we are kind of eager to be the place that shepherds and generally interfaces with open source projects in general. So I think this is a good fit, and I'm feeling positivity in the room. What I would like to do is to summarize this discussion and mail it out to the mailing list, saying this is what the open source workstream is intending to do. We are changing our remit, so to speak. We're changing our mission statement slightly from this to this, and we are doing it for these reasons so that we can help the INI kind of support other open source projects, recommend open source projects, etc. Essentially do the tech bits. So we should tell everybody else. That's thing number 1. And I think thing number 2 is, with your permission, I would like to extend our next meeting occurrence in 2 weeks to an hour, so that we have a little bit more time to do planning around this new piece that we're hoping to take in.
So I agree. I think that we should hold off on extension until because this proposal will change the people who are in the room, which will change the times that people are interested in coming to this meeting. So I think that we should have something of an asynchronous bit on this for a little bit before we change meeting times, with the hopes to eventually get more people in the room, and then actually change the meeting time to something that works for those new people. The other part of it is give me a little bit to have some conversations in the background. There are people who expressed interest in community and tooling leading that. So let me have those conversations first before, because I think what this would be is also adding another 1 or 2 leads to this group to support.
And for the folks who don't know, there is a specific channel dedicated to community and tooling in the Slack channel already. So please jump in the conversation.
Yeah. And those may fold into each other or into this channel. Things will collapse as required. But Stephen, just to clarify, we're good to summarize this conversation and send it out to the mailing list. And I want to do that specifically to kind of draw the people into the room who might need to be here.
I would like to get some commit from the people who are interested in potentially leading the community and tooling side before we propose it. Okay.
I will draft something up anyways, and then we can just have it ready to go when we're ready to go. Okay.
Perfect.
So do you envision the community and tooling meetings happening together, or the folks focused on tooling would work and then we'll bring it all into this meeting? Because my concern is, again, 2 related but different objectives.
So I think some of this will become readout, I see that like for tooling at least, a lot of it can potentially be done async. So I envision a larger, a meeting with more people and a longer meeting to capture all of the themes.
Okay.
I'm
so-
interested in co-leading tooling, at least to get it started. And I know
And
there
I
are
was gonna
folks who would run
DM
with
you. All right, so we'll chat offline a little bit. I've got
Okay.
one more person who's interested as well. So
Okay, that'd be brilliant. Okay,
awesome.
good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think that's all we wrote today. I will see you all in a couple of weeks. I'll see you all next week for the general meeting, and thank you very much for your time.
Bye, everyone.
Good
Have a
everyone.
great
Bye.
Bye.